Welcome to my dad's car. Enjoy!
Welcome to My Dad's Car, a podcast discussing our personal relationship with automotive nostalgia. And you know what? It doesn't even have to be about your dad's car. It can be your mum's, your grand's, your parents', guardians, or even a neighbour's. If it made an impression, let's talk about it. Hello, you alright?
Hello. Yeah, good. How's things?
Not too bad. Can you hear us? Are we there?
I can hear you now.
Super. Yeah, Lewis from Takona, welcome along to My Dad's Car.
Well, thank you for having me.
I was aware of your work for a while, and we saw you up at Harry's Ignition opening. Obviously, you did some talking, and which was great, and then got chatting to everyone, and we sort of missed each other a little bit. And then, reached out and said, would you like to come on for a chat? And you were like, yeah.
And here we are.
So, yeah, I'm Andy. This is John, who's over there.
Nice to meet you, Lewis.
Nice to meet you, John.
Before we kind of jump straight into it, do you want to give us a quick minute on what Takona's all about for those who aren't aware? Hopefully we'll continue to spread the message for you.
Yeah, sure. So Takona, in its kind of purest essence, is a clothing brand that uses cars to create conversations. So it's automotive themed, that acts as a very easy identifier for if someone's interested in cars, and it allows for the conversations to be started with strangers, basically. So alongside making automotive clothing, I run a podcast and a network of car meets. So the whole idea is let's use cars to connect people, get them talking to one another. And hopefully, if we can encourage them to talk a little bit more about their mental health, we'll be doing a good thing with it all, and breaking down some barriers around those conversations, using cars as the easiest way to get started.
Fantastic. I think, we found any sort of talking is good talking, isn't it? Once you kind of get going, then it's like peeling an onion, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And it only takes a little bit to start breaking down the barriers, and you find quite quickly that you end up into a proper chat without too much encouragement. It just, that initial bit of momentum is kind of all that's needed to get things going.
Fantastic. So, on to sort of the business matters, I guess. We ask everyone the same question. What's your earliest motoring memory or car memory?
So my dad had a 205 GTI, which is appropriate for the name of this podcast. And I think my earliest car memory is him selling that car and me kind of crying about it right up until he turned up with a Celica to replace it.
Consolation prize.
Yeah, well, when he sold the Celica, the guy that bought it off him came in an XJS.
Nice. And
I asked him, well, can't we just swap for his car? And my dad was like, no, that's a much nicer car than our Celica. And it was the wedge-shaped Celica. It's a D-Reg Celica.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even like a GT4 or the more modern stuff back in the 90s.
Pop-up lights, though?
Yeah, pop-up lights. It used to break down all the time.
What colour?
Red.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
I would have one now. If I had the space and the money, I'd have one now, just because they are quite a cool thing. And they're a little bit, forgotten about. I see one every so often. And I'm always tempted to go and knock on the door and be like, how much do you want for it?
There was a red MR2 Mark 1, which was around the corner from where I grew up for years and years. I always fancied one of those.
Yeah. They're a lot of fun, to be fair. A friend of mine's got a Mark 2, and he's just put the turbo engine in it. And it's probably quite dangerous because they're all fiberglass and plastic, but it's a lot of fun before you have the crash.
Absolutely. So where did you go after the Celica?
Oh, what did he have after the Celica? I think he got his first company car, which was an E46.
Okay.
Which got hit by a lorry. He went down the side and just destroyed this BMW.
Yeah.
I think after that he had a Mark 1 TT back when they first came out. So the 180 brake one. And then he got rid of that and got an E46 M3 convertible. And then swapped that for a 996 turbo Porsche.
Nice.
That's quite a back catalogue, isn't it?
Yeah, and then he got bored of cars, I think, and stopped buying interesting cars. So I can't remember what he had after that. But he had that Porsche for a while. It wasn't like he gave it a year and then just gave up. We did a couple of trips to Le Mans in it and a trip to the south of Spain in it, amongst other rides out here and there. So a lot of fond memories connected to that Porsche, to be fair.
Yeah.
Was that, or all of them really, were they kind of a family car? Have you got siblings? Was there a few of you squeezed in there, or was it just you and your dad? Or
yeah, so I've got two brothers. So none of them had 5 seats, which meant one of us was always kind of squeezed in somewhere where it probably shouldn't have been. And if it was current day, we would have gotten a lot of trouble, especially with not having car seats and things like that.
Yeah.
But at the time, you could kind of just get away with sneaking a small child in a cubby hole somewhere. And with the Porsche, I remember the transmission tunnel kind of sits in between the 2 rear seats. So it's not like a bench like a bigger car would be. So my youngest brother would just sit on that, and me and my other brother would kind of just hold on to his legs. That was kind of how it went. But yeah, it was always fun turning up at like a car park and parking in the parent and child, especially in a Porsche, and getting all the funny looks. And then the 3 of us just kind of fall out the back. And I was like, oh, fair enough. Yeah, for parent and child, that's quite appropriate. We would get a lot of funny looks until the trio would fall out.
Did you have any involvement in the selection of your dad's cars, Lewis, when it came to that point?
No. He'd set up a couple of businesses and he was doing all right. So he made a lot of friends in the kind of car dealer world in the area. Mm-hmm. And it was always, so-and-so's got this in, so I've bought that. And there was never any consultation. It was quite impulsive, really, which I can attest to, as that's how I ended up with my GT86, was that's fun. I'll see if I can make the numbers work. And here we are. So yeah, one day he left in an M3 and came back in a Porsche. That's how it went.
Nice.
Was there a more sensible family car on the drive at any point? Did your mum drive? Or
my mum does drive, yeah. She had a Citroen Zara Picasso for a bit.
Lovely.
Beautiful.
That was probably about as sensible as we got. For a time, she was driving a Escort van that my dad had bought because he'd bought a second house that it needed loads of work. So he bought a little van, and that used to kind of blow a head gasket every so often. So we'd be on the way to school and then there'd just be a plume of smoke trailing behind us as all the oil and water would mix.
Would you be in the back of that kind of Fools and Horses style?
Yeah, pre-paying attention to safety regulations, there'd be 2 of us sat on the wheel arches.
Yeah.
And usually the smallest one in the front, because it was easier for them to strap in and me and my other brother to kind of just hold on. And that continued. So that van went, and a bit further down the line, my dad bought a Suzuki Carry.
Okay.
Which was when I was about 14, 15. So I learned to drive in that thing because we lived on a place with a bit of space around it. So I could at least just drive around without kind of being on the road.
They're a bit like a Bedford Rascal. Is that the same sort of thing?
Yeah. So it's technically an MR2 because it's mid-engined, rear-wheel drive and 2 seats, but not in the kind of sports format. It's more of a utility MR2. But it meant that you could, if you really wanted to, you could get the back end to kind of go a little bit, which if you're in a field, is much easier to do because it's muddy. But it also means that it gets stuck way quicker.
Quite a high centre of gravity, though. I drove a Bedford Rascal and it wasn't a pleasant experience.
Yeah, we... obviously not on the public roads, tried to see how fast we could get it to go, and got up to about 85 before it started to get really terrifying.
Jeez.
Because just any slight breeze and the whole thing would really sway quite aggressively. So they're kind of limited to the speed limits by physics more than anything else.
Yeah.
And fear. You don't want to go faster than that in one of those things.
And the engine's under the passenger seat or something, isn't it? I think on those.
Yeah. So 1.3 though. So you've got a little bit of poke. It's not
Juicy.
Like it's a K car 660cc thing. It's got enough to kind of carry stuff around, and turns out 3 kids all in the back.
Just rolling around on cushions and.
Yeah, so we had a piece of carpet that was like the shape of the floor.
Yeah.
But not like car carpet, like out of a house.
Off-cut.
And then the wheel arches. So you just hold on and hope for the best, I suppose. And because I grew up in the countryside, it was all twisty country lanes to get anywhere. So in the back of that thing, if you weren't paying attention to where if you weren't looking forward, it'd really throw you off in a sharp enough corner. I think me and friends have all thrown up in the back of vans whilst being driven somewhere by my parents, just because it's so much movement.
He had to get some handrails installed inside, didn't he? Make it a bit like a tube or something.
Yeah, what we'd do is we'd pop the headrests up on the front 2 seats so that you had 2 little bars to hold on to.
Yeah.
And that would make it substantially easier. But then you're on your knees. So you were fighting against how long your knees would last before they started to ache. But yeah, I think either that or just a seatbelt across the paneling so that you could just strap in while you were on the wheel arch. That might have made a bit of a difference too.
Quite considered just having a bit of carpet down at least for the knees, I suppose.
I think the carpet just when you really compress something on a carpet, it just becomes solid. I think that's all that happened.
I remember travelling in the back of a Luton van. We'd picked up a sofa from somewhere, and obviously, naturally, we had more people than the cab of the van would take. So I was travelling in the rear of this Luton van on the sofa, and while we were travelling down the dual carriageway, the roll shutter at the back started opening, and it was a horrible experience. Kind of trying to just keep your foot on that, obviously, stop this sofa moving around in the back.
Sounds like some sort of bit of a James Bond moment there, isn't it? Goodbye, Mr. Bond.
The end of the Italian job, I thought, like, could be nice.
Did you not take any straps or rope or anything to hold that down?
I don't know whether we did, I think it was just a case of, I think we picked the sofa up after doing something, like maybe someone had moved house and we managed to pick up a sofa like on the like free ads or something. It was like, oh, before we take this van back, let's go and get this sofa from East Preston or something, I think it was. And yeah, I ended up in the back of it, sort of peering through this gap, which kind of just kept going like this with the roll shutter.
Oh, dear.
Just hoping I wasn't going to be scraped off the carriageway.
My friend's mum had, I think it was like an E300 estate that had the rear-facing back seats.
Yeah.
So it's like a 7-seater back before people carriers were a thing. And even though she'd only be taking 2 of us home from school, we'd always sit like facing out the back window and just wave at everyone. And like it's way more exciting when there's a little bit of mystery to where you're going and you're facing the wrong way and you can wave at strangers as a child. Like, it's a very similar thing to being stood in the back of a Luton van with the shutter up. Like, I bet you got some really funny looks.
We've had a couple of guests, haven't we, that have mentioned those Mercs before with the rear-facing seats, the death seats. I think I labelled them before.
Yeah, you lose your knees in a rear crash,
and they're good for travel sickness as well, aren't they? If, like, looking the wrong way, that and a colouring book, you're going to throw up.
Well, it's funny you should say. We took the TT to Malaga in Spain. So there was my dad, my granddad, me, and my middle brother, and we were going through the Pyrenees, and it was back when you didn't have like screens and things in cars. So I had a laptop. I was watching Ice Age in the back seat. And then we kind of got halfway through the Pyrenees and I kind of snapped back to reality for a second. And then all of the motion just hit me in one go. And I think I gave my dad about 4 seconds warning before just throwing up everywhere. Just filmed this TT. And that was on the way down. So we then had like 10 days in Spain and then the drive home, with it just getting warmer and warmer as we got further and further south. And because it was fully leather interior, it just created like a bowl in the back and just absolutely destroyed the inside of this TT.
At least it wasn't cloth.
Yeah, if it was cloth, it would have really soaked in and we'd have had months of that just kind of seeping out every so often with smells.
Oh, that's horrendous.
Yeah, travel sickness is a real thing, and you don't not look at the road if you are in any way susceptible to it because it catches you like immediately.
Yeah. I used to suffer with it really badly when I was younger, to the point where if I knew we were taking like a semi-long journey, I'd make the point of not eating, which would probably just make the situation worse, to be honest, because I used to think, if I eat, it's going to come up. So, yeah, it's not nice.
Would you attribute your kind of interest in cars to your father? Or have you kind of had other influence from kind of other people as well?
No, I'd say it comes from my dad and from his dad.
Okay.
Growing up, my granddad had an Austin 7 in his garage, just in bits, that he'd stripped apart. As all project cars are, you strip them apart and then you go, yeah, I'll get around to that. And then 15 years later, it's still in the garage in bits.
Yeah.
And by the time I was old enough to kind of understand what it was and help put it back together, he sold it.
Oh, no.
So I spent like all of my childhood peering into his garage, looking at this really old car in pieces and going, yeah, one day we'll fix that up. And then we moved to my dad and my granddad bought a set of barns that they then converted into houses. So we moved over there and he was like, I haven't got the space for it. So I've sold it. I was like, great, there's that project car gone. Yeah, I went to see him the other day and he was telling me he had a Rover 75, but like an original one. And his favourite thing is just the headlights on it were like 3 foot. Every time he says this, they get bigger. 3 foot tall, these headlights. But he bought a Rolls Royce for like £7 back in the 60s, and it cost him a tenner to fill it up. He got one tank out and then sold it again. He was like, it's way too expensive to try and run this thing. So I think that's where the love of cars really originated from. And then obviously my dad's a bit of a petrol head, or he was. I don't think he is anymore. But he used to be a lot more interested in cars, but I don't think in the same way that I am. I think he's of the generation that you kind of had to know what cars were, otherwise you couldn't drive them. If it broke, you kind of had to fix it unless you were really wealthy.
Yeah.
So you had to have a bit of an interest in them. Whereas a lot of people now, they're not that fussed because most cars just work. So they're like, what features does it have? Like, how does it sit? How does it drive? And from there, they're not really interested. Whereas my interest in cars is now, I like unique, quirky things that people have kind of forgotten about, which is why I've got my little Renault 5. But my dad's never really gone down that, I'm going to buy a quirky little classic and enjoy having a classic car. He's always just been like, oh, I can afford this fast car now. And that was kind of his interest in cars, was what's the fastest thing I can afford, rather than what's the most interesting car or what classic car can I have or anything like that. It was always just I like cars, but I'm not a nerd about it, whereas I'm very much a bit of a nerd about it.
Would you say there was kind of a status thing there with his choice of cars?
Probably a bit, yeah. He was a financial advisor, which obviously comes with a bit of that territory anyway. And he's always kind of liked having something that's a little bit flashy, but fast.
Yeah.
So he likes driving, or he did. I don't know if he still does. I think he's not been on the road for a few years now. He liked driving quickly. So if he could go quick, he was happy.
Yeah.
Whereas it's not the same as like my little Toyota is really good dynamic car, but it's not that fast. But I enjoy that more than something really high powerful.
Yeah.
So I think it was often more of it goes really fast and I look like I've got some money. He's quite happy with that because he could turn up at places and people would kind of treat him initially with a bit of extra respect almost. Because he was in finance, he'd turn up at a customer's house and he looked like he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Which is kind of half the battle when you're meeting someone for the first time and trying to effectively get money from them. It was I'm good at my job because I can therefore afford a Porsche, so I must be good at what I do. So you can trust what I say is accurate, true, or whatever. Whereas I'm not really that inclined. I'm not bothered what I look like. My Renault 5 cost me £500, and I'm happier in that car than I am in anything else because it's fun, it's interesting, and it's quirky, and it has its own charm, its own character. I would happily drive that every day if I could.
Yeah.
Which it's a big difference, but it does mean that I grew up around cars, so I can't really complain too much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds as if your dad kind of had like stepping stones to not the end game car, but you could tell, can't you, like 205 to M3 Porsche.
Yeah, I think the 205 and the Celica were his, like, these are interesting cars. And then he got into kind of the financial world and it was like, oh, BMW. And then it was kind of on this, what's the coolest thing that's going to make me look good for customers rather than what do I find interesting? So like with the TT, it was kind of the only sports car that they could get in the company car range.
Yeah.
She was like, well, that's the one that's going to make me stand out from everybody else because everybody else is in a Beamer or a Merc, whereas I'm in a sports car. So I therefore am a little bit more interesting. And then that obviously progressed up the scale, as you say, like M3 and then the Porsche. It was all kind of for a purpose to put it in that box.
Apparently that's why E46 M3s quite often have got a lot of previous owners because they do exactly what your dad did.
Yeah.
They get it and then maybe have a year or two and then go on to the Porsche. Not that I know that firsthand, but...
A friend of mine's got an E46 and she absolutely loves it. It's her favourite car ever.
Yeah.
And it's not that she couldn't step into anything else. She just genuinely really loves it as a car.
I've had a few in the family that, say exactly the same thing. They just think they're a bit like a comfy shoe. They're just a great sort of all-rounder.
Yeah. Someone was comparing the current M2 to the E46 M3 the other day. And if you go on inflation, an E46 M3 in today's money would be about 65, 66 grand, which will get you an M2 without the high performance pack on. So it's a very comparable car. And the E46 is probably smaller than the M2 now.
Yeah.
Fatter and softer and squidgier and more pedestrian friendly.
Do you recall any music from childhood trips out in the cars?
Right. So when we went to Spain in this TT, we had a 6 CD multi-changer which my dad was like, yeah, I brought the CDs. We're all right. We've got enough to get us to Spain. But what he hadn't done is actually put them in the car. So we had one CD, and that was Country and Western's Greatest Hits.
Very nice.
So after the first couple of goes round on Boy Named Sue, 9 to 5, Coward of the Cat, like proper like classics, me and my brother got bored and started just rewording it all with as many poo jokes as we could, basically. So we had probably, I think it was a 3 CD box. So it wasn't just 12 songs. We probably had 35 songs of just country and Western music that my dad didn't listen to. It's not like that was his music. My dad's an 80s pop man. It was just the only CD that happened to be in the car because he'd forgot his like wallet thing of CDs.
Yeah.
So that's all we had for 14 days.
Blimey.
So we had the radio while we were in England. And then as soon as we left England, it was like everybody's talking French and then Spanish. So we don't actually know what's going on. So then we had the one CD. And it never occurred to us to
buy a CD.
Yeah, we were literally like, well, I guess that's what we've got. And we drove all the way to Spain with it.
Is this the vomit trip as well?
That's the vomit trip, yeah. So we had the vomit comet and country and Western music. And then when we got to Spain...
Your poor brother.
It's worse for my brother in this story, unfortunately. We were staying in a friend of my dad had an apartment down on the south coast that we were staying in. And one night, my brother got out of bed and slipped on the granite floor and hit his head on the granite corner skirting board that was there and split his head open.
Oh, God.
So he'd had me throw up all over him, country and Western music for, I think it was probably like 6 days by that point, and then cracked his head open on a stone skirting board. Fortunately, I think he was about 6, so he doesn't remember any of it. It was not a good one for my little brother.
No, you need some counselling after that. What colour was the TT?
Black, metallic black.
Coupe or cab?
Coupe.
Are the Cabrinets 2-seat?
Yeah. Cabs are 2-seat because they've got the rollover hoops, haven't they?
Ah.
If it was a cab, would you have vomited over the side, Lewis, rather than...
like a boat?
That's true, yeah.
Well, I wouldn't have been in it because there's only 2 seats, so I couldn't have gone anyway.
No.
I'd have been in the boot. No, it was the 1.8. It was with the spoiler. So post recall, but pre 225.
Yeah.
And he bought the number plate M10KTT. So it said MyOKTT on it. He's always been quite good at getting interesting number plates. That's always been a fun thing that he's done.
Okay.
That was the defining factor of the car, was MyOKTT was the number plate.
That's probably worth more than the car these days, isn't it? That plate, I'd imagine. Potentially.
Yeah, it probably is. I don't know if it's still around. I need to do a DVLA check, I think.
Yeah.
The Mark 1 TT is kind of rock bottom, isn't it? Like you can buy one for £500. Like it's going to cost you an arm and a leg, but
yeah. Mate of mine's just bought one. I think he paid $4,000 for it because it's 60,000 miles on. It's a really nice spec, and within a week, it's gone through a coil spring and failed its MOT.
Jeez.
So they are at rock bottom for a reason at the moment, but hopefully enough people will save them and keep them going so that they'll kind of mature a bit as a classic.
Yeah, iconic piece of design, like really of its time, isn't it? Kind of pre-millennium styling.
Yeah, they did a really good job with it. Another friend of mine who runs the cafe we started Coffees and Cars from, he's got one on his drive that he's slowly kind of, he says he's OEM plus restoring. But I think before he took it off the road, it was running about 400 brake.
Okay.
So it's quite a spicy little thing. And he's done the 240 conversion where you take the back seats out and put the brace bar with the netting in.
Yeah.
So it's quite a cool little thing, actually. And I'm hoping he gets it sorted so that we can go and take it for a drive, because I imagine it'll be ridiculous with 400 horsepower from the 1.8T.
Yeah.
Any cars, Lewis, that your dad had that you would like to get your hands on? Well, not obviously the same one, but...
I would like a 205 GTI. I would like a Celica. I would like an E46 M3. And I'd quite like a 996 Turbo. Yeah. For all his faults, he's had quite a good taste in cars.
That was easy.
He also had a Hilux. It's his first car. And a Ford Orion injection gear, I think it was.
Nice.
So he's had some interesting stuff. I can't fault him for that. I'd probably also like a Suzuki Carrier again, because that was quite a good fun little thing. But I'd like the little pickup 4x4 version that they did. I think that would be quite good fun to just play around in more than anything.
I noticed Johnny Smith's just road tested something sort of similar, hasn't
I
he?
think that was the
Daihatsu or something, yeah.
Thing. Yeah. And that looks like he had quite a good day with it. Like, properly took it off-road and everything.
I've not seen the video yet, but...
Yeah. But yeah, so very easy answer. I've just yes to pretty much everything above, except for his E46 318i, which I'm not really that interested in.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I still see those floating around, actually, so testament to the build, but as soon as I see it, I know it's a 318 because of the wheels or a single exhaust, so yeah.
A friend of mine's got the 325i, which is quite a nice car, actually. But they did a Williams edition, which had the Williams logo stitched into the headrests and had a bit of extra trim on it.
Okay. Don't think I've seen that.
Yeah, I think if you can find one, they're quite rare. But there's some interesting, niche spec BMWs that, as I spend more time around BMW people, I learn about. But this is the difference between my dad and me. Like, he wouldn't know any of this sort of stuff. So I didn't inherit that kind of interest in cars. So I'm kind of learning all this niche car trivia from scratch as I just am around cars more often.
Yeah.
So I see friends that really know really specific details of a lot of BMWs more than anything. And I'm always like, how do you know this stuff? It's such a weird, niche thing to know so much about. But it's like an E39 in a specific color with a specific set of wheels that they only made for 6 months or something, really, really niche that you could just end up on these little rabbit holes. You go, I don't know how you end up with this knowledge. And then I start coming up with the Williams E46 and going, oh, wait, no, I'm picking up on it as well. This is how it happens. You spend time around people that know stuff, and then you just kind of learn by proxy.
Were you into car magazines as a kid?
No, I wasn't, actually. I had a book of dream cars. It was a really thick, really big book that had, so this was in the late 90s, early 2000s, so it kind of went up to the McLaren F1 as the big daddy supercar. And I kind of just religiously studied that. I just went through and learned all the top speeds, all the brake horsepowers, all the engines, just all the statistics on it. It was that and top trumps. So childhood me just got really into just memorizing facts that I can't remember any of now. It's always just the XJ220 was supposed to have a V12, and then they put a V6 in it, and then it did this, and then it did that. And I could just sit there and spool off all of this random information to anyone that would listen for more than 5 minutes. But yeah, never got into car magazines, which is quite frustrating because now I quite like a car magazine, and I actually have just written an article for one.
Okay.
Do a regular online bit of writing and stuff like that. So it's another one of those things. I was like, well, if I was into that as a kid, I'd be way further down that line by now, more than likely.
You'd have a loft full of old magazines like me. That's what you'd end up with because you can't bear to throw them away. That one's quite good.
Yeah.
When am I ever going to read that magazine again?
The amount of time that you would need to just go through all the stuff that you have. I get it, and I haven't got that big of a magazine collection, and I'm still 3 issues behind on one that I really like. And it's just a time management thing. It's how can I not have the time to do something I really enjoy? What is going wrong in my head that I don't just go, go and read that magazine. I really like that.
Yeah.
It's a weird phenomenon. But no, unfortunately, no, magazines aren't a thing that I grew up with, which they should have.
I've got a large box in my shed that's got several magazines, mainly old football magazines and stuff, but there's definitely a lot of sort of old car stuff in there. So it's on my to-do list to sift through all of that and see if there's anything interesting.
I've started trying to give them away.
Sort of car magazines, you just think, what's the point in keeping it at the time? But looking back,
they're fun to flick through kind of 20, 30 years down the line.
Yeah.
I've got some of my dad's stuff from, when he was younger. I remember going up to my grandma's house and where he grew up and kind of finding Motorsport magazine or whatever from the 60s, 70s. You're flicking through that. That's kind of interesting.
All the adverts and stuff.
Yeah, we had a similar thing recently. Someone brought, I think it was an Autosport from 1987, something like that, along to a car meet recently.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, 7 of us were just huddled around this magazine, looking at all the old John Player special adverts, and the new De Tomaso Pantera was the headline thing. So they had that and a Countach next to each other. But it's so much more interesting now because you've got all the nostalgia for stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas at the time, it was just another car mag. The most recent one that I went back and found was the 2012 Top Gear Car of the Year one that had the GT86 in it.
Okay.
And that's just because I have the car. I was like, well, I'll have that one then because it's got my car in it. Other than that, I imagine in 15 years, we'll look back and go, I remember when that came out. How cool was that? And why didn't we get that car? And why didn't we do this? And why didn't we do that? And all that nostalgia will then come flooding through as we're sat in our driverless cars, all in a big loop around the M25, barely moving.
I think, yeah, when you look back, and I guess we know how the story played out now. Like, you know, kind of the journey the Countach or the Pantera went on, or like your car, for example, and you know that they've kind of gone like that, whatever, with prices. And it's nice, isn't it? You flick through it and you're like, oh, I could buy an E-Type Jag for £1,000.
Yeah. And then you go, would I be able to afford £1,000 40 years ago? Were houses still like 10 grand back then? You're like, maybe I could get a Jag.
Yeah.
I found we've just bought our first house, and it's like a 70s built house. I was up in the loft, just putting stuff in the loft. And they've put a little bit of carpet over the boarding just so that your feet aren't on hardwood flooring. And I pulled this bit of carpet back, and there was a car sales section from a newspaper there.
Nice.
And I think it was from like 1979. So there was some like really cool, quirky stuff from back in the day that was like 300 quid. And then it's like, this car's brand new. It's £7,000. Like, God, and it was like a Mercedes, not like a Dacia would be, like a proper nice car. £7,000. It's absolutely wild. And then I look back at how much our house cost when it was built and how much we've just paid for it, and I have the exact same feeling of, I wish I was buying it back then.
Yeah, although it's not in correlation, is it, anymore? But obviously what people were earning back then was a kind of a fraction of what we earn now, although house prices are dramatically higher than what you earn.
I saw a thing exactly on this topic the other day, and it was saying to earn the comparison of 30 grand back in the 80s. It was in America. So if you were earning 30 grand in the 80s, it's the same as earning 160 grand today.
Good God.
That's the amount of buying power you had back in the 80s.
Yeah.
So we're very much off that track at the minute. I'd love to be earning 160 grand a year. The amount of cars I could buy for that much money.
Yeah, wonderful, wouldn't it?
And the amount of space that I could buy to keep all these cars in.
That's the trickier thing, like, and that also comes back to like, yeah, had you have bought an E-Type Jaguar for £1,000 in whenever it was, like, yeah, where would you keep it? Like, what sort of state would it be in now? If
Johnny Smith would be doing a video on it as a barn find, probably.
Yeah,
you start reassessing your life path when you see those old ads. You sort of think, well, if I hadn't have met her and had those kids, then maybe I would have invested in that car. And
No, it's
edit that bit out, Andy.
Yeah, I'm sure she's going to hear that. Like, that's what you think of.
She doesn't listen anymore.
novelty's worn off.
Yeah, my other half says I have a podcast voice. And if I'm ever recording anything at home, she can tell because it penetrates the walls much more effectively. Normally, I'm quiet and in my own little cave down in the garage, and then every so often she's like, "Oh, he's talking to someone. Must be podcasting today." Which probably happens for you too, and they maybe just haven't said anything yet.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, I guess so.
We're up against the wall with a little glass tumbler, eavesdropping.
Yeah, that's it. She's heard what you've just said, so it doesn't matter if it's edited out or not.
It's going in the notepad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That'll come back to get you in about 3 years' time.
Yeah.
Well, back on the 15th of December in 2023, this is what you said about me when you didn't know I was here.
Thought that bang on the head was funny, did you?
Yeah. It's a light concussion, was it? I could have died. It's a good job she wasn't in the back of an old Mercedes, isn't it?
That's a good point, yeah.
She'd have lost her knees. Probably wouldn't have got a concussion.
Yeah. I'd be installing a stanner, wouldn't I, or something right now, rather than doing this.
Sorry,
podcast.
mate, I can't do the podcast anymore. I've got to put a stair lift.
Yeah, very good.
Goodness. Well, yeah, we'll bring things to a close. Thank you very much for joining us.
That's all right. Absolute pleasure. I'll tell you what, you guys are a lot more structured than I am with mine, so fair play to you. The tangents are a lot more frequent when I record with people. So you've got a lot more control than I have.
We try and bring it back round. It's and I think one of those reasons, off we go on a tangent, is there are a lot of car podcasts out there, aren't there, where people kind of goes into opinion or just a life story of a particular person and their cars. And whilst it's nice to hear those, we try and focus on kind of the cars which maybe influenced us, belong to particular people rather than what we're driving now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important that there is a bit more about the actual subject matter rather than just what I think about BMWs or whatever it is. It's probably better to keep it on topic. But which suits the style of what you guys are doing. So fair play.
Cool. Well, yeah, thank you very much for joining us and becoming part of our journey.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Lewis. Nice to meet you.
Cheers, guys. See you soon.
Take care. Bye.
Cool.
It's a wrap.
It is a wrap, yeah. I like Lewis. He's got some nice stuff to say. We did have a few tangents,
Yeah.
but some good stories as well. He must be a few years younger than us, I think. But yeah, some more modern stuff, I suppose. Some interesting bits.
Yeah, no, it's good to get him on because we had him lined up for a bit, haven't we? But yeah, looking forward to that one. And no, I don't think it disappointed. It was really good. And there's a very nice car history that his father had as well.
Yeah, that's a good checklist, isn't it? Like, obviously, 205 GTI is a bit of a staple, isn't it? For, I guess, people of a certain age, if you're into cars. Maybe you did Golf GTI, maybe you did 205 GTI.
Yeah.
The Celica are a little bit more of a wild card.
Yeah.
You can see kind of the track that his father was taking towards that sort of sports car, wanting something that, had a bit of a look to it. Obviously enhanced what he was doing business-wise, or at least sort of set him aside from others. So
yeah, and it's a good thing that Lewis has got going on as well, isn't it, with the whole Takona thing?
Yeah.
Obviously circling back around motoring, but looking at the bigger picture, doing some good stuff there.
Yeah, I think so. And yesterday he announced he's just been sponsored by Scalextrics.
Brilliant.
So hats off to him. That's pretty cool, isn't it?
I'd like to see Scalextrics become like a Christmas favourite again. It's probably slipped down a bit, isn't it, of late, I guess, with all the other sort of toy competition. But certainly in our day, it was right up there, wasn't it?
Yeah, I guess computers have taken over, haven't they? You can just pop a disc in, or you probably don't even have to do that now. Just turn it on, sign in.
Just look at it.
It just knows that you want to do something, and you want to do drive, and then you've not got to take over the lounge.
Yeah, that's true.
And then after half an hour, Mum comes in with a tray or something and trips over it.
Yeah.
Who's left the Scalextrics out? I'm coming back to it. You're upstairs with a basket of Lego on the floor.
Mum's crushed your Capri.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, broken windscreen on your Mighty Metro, and the barriers come off the hairpin. Grandstands flattened.
Yeah.
Dogs run off with a controller.
I can't remember if I've still got some Scalextrics either in the shed or the loft. Might well have. I have to dig those out.
I've got some actually, and actually we had a renaissance. Like some of my friends, we probably while we were at college, actually, we decided to chip together and went and bought like a load. And I think one of them had some from being a kid, so we filled like the downstairs of his house with this massive Scalextric set. And then we set about trying to make twin-engined cars using a soldering iron to cut bits of plastic out and lashing these extra engines up, cutting stuff up.
A few alarm bells going off in the health and safety department, aren't there, with Scalextrics back in the day?
Oh yeah, especially I think when you start doing that. But
I remember we had, must have been my brother's, I think it's probably from the 80s. There was a pair of Porsches. I think it was a gold one and maybe a silver one, but they had these light-up headlights.
Yeah.
Which was very cool back in the day. Yeah. I think they went missing, sadly.
Yeah, I think you'd done well, hadn't you? If you hadn't just got sort of the oval, you'd got like a figure of 8 or a hairpin or something. If it had the lights on it as well, like this wasn't just the entry level. It had a jump, maybe. I remember there was a few of them with jumps, wasn't there?
A few marshals, maybe.
A few marshals, a little chicane, or where it went closer together and they kind of bumped themselves off.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a...
I always just remember playing it, and then you'd get the smell of Scalextrics. But it was slightly alarming.
Hot dust.
Are we sort of 2 minutes away from a house fire? Or is that all normal? I'm not sure.
The other thing that's just nice with Scalextric, massive box. So if it was a birthday or Christmas, you really felt you got something. It wasn't just...
Yeah.
That was like, you knew there was a big box under that tree. And
I actually remember, I think for my birthday one year, I didn't know what I was getting. But I knew Dad had gone to the cash and carry, not just for the shop, but I knew he was going to pick up a present for me. So I just remember looking out the window and seeing him sort of shutting the boot of the Merc. And he had, like you say, a huge box, which was clearly, I think it was a Scalextrics that had Senna's McLaren on the front and probably Mansell's Williams.
Yeah.
Again, I think that's long gone, but I vividly remember that. It wasn't like the proper Scalextrics. It's like another version of it, small sort of F1 cars.
Yeah.
But, that was a phenomenal track, like in terms of the twists and turns and stuff like that. Yeah, good memories. Commandeered the lounge for about a week, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. So, great to have Lewis on. big fans of what he does.
Definitely.
Yeah, look him up at Takona.co.uk, something like that. He's on Instagram and those sort of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing some good stuff. So yeah, hats off to him, and thank you very much for coming on the podcast. Okay, thank you very much, John.
Pleasure.
We'll wrap it up. Roll the credits.
Thank you for listening to My Dad's Car. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please support us. Buy us a coffee and subscribe. And tell all your friends.